Hi, welcome back to lesson 4. This lesson is on fat and fluids, so we're talking about one of the macronutrients and then just the importance in general of fluids in our diet. There's 4 assignments. This week, one is a discussion, so you can read an article and on a fat, talk about what you think is the importance of different types of fat. Another worksheet on alcohol and the risks and benefits. Another response, and then the part of the project for super tracker analysis, this time looking at just the macronutrients and not the vitamins and minerals. So to get started on the fats, just briefly, there's a different, this can be complicated, we'll try to make it easy, but there's a saturated and there's polyunsaturated fatty acids. So fatty acids are chains of carbon attached with hydrogen attached. So some of these fats are saturated, which means you can see the difference between this chemical and this chemical. This one has a double bond, this one does not. Saturated fat is solid at room temperature because of this single chain of carbon. Whereas when you have a double bond, that causes the property of the fat to be liquid or at least semi-solid at room temperature. So that's the difference in these two saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. The thing that's interesting about fat, here's a discussion. The saturated is 4 bonds, unsaturated has a double bond. And if you look at this page here, there's different types of fat. This seems complicated, but notice that each of these bends is a carbon. So it's a carbon, 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 carbon. So this is a carbon chain. Some are long, some are short. So basically these are the names of different fatty acids. Your body makes fatty acids in the liver. It makes fatty acids from carbohydrates. If you've eaten a large donut or several donuts and your body can't use the carbohydrate, it stores it in the liver and then it can convert the carbohydrate to fat. So you will make almost all of these can be made in your body except for these two right here. These are essential fatty acids. You might hear about EFA, essential fatty acids, which we cannot make and have to be ingested. These two happen to be unsaturated because they have double bonds. That little line there means it's a double bond between the carbon, 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 carbon. So these are long chain unsaturated fatty acids that are essential. And the thing is, it's interesting is that every fat that you, like a safflower oil or corn oil, they aren't all one type of fatty acid. A fatty acid is a triglyceride, usually is how we eat food, and it has 3 of these fatty acids attached to make one triglyceride, tri meaning 3. So you might have there might be an oil that has several different fatty acids attached to it. So our body, what I'm trying to say is, has a variety of fatty acids, and some of them are saturated, some are monounsaturated, which is the one, and some are polyunsaturated, which means more than one double bond. So this oleic acid is a monounsaturated. Linoleic is a polyunsaturated. So let's go ahead and look again then. So we're talking about just the polyunsaturated fats have a couple different categories. These are the ones that have a double bond. The omega-3, these are the essentials, the omega-3 and the omega-6. The reason they're called omega-3 and 6 just by location of the double bond. So if I go back to this one, you can see the linoleic, which is the same as omega-6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The double bond, the first double bond is the 6th carbon from the omega end of the chain. So that's why that's an omega-6. This is omega-3 because 1, 2, 3, the first double bond is the 3rd carbon from the omega end. So that's why they're called omega-3 or alpha-linolenic, omega-6 linoleic. They seem confusing, but when you go back to that chart, you can keep seeing why that works that way. And then you might see sometimes that you can buy pills that have essential fatty acids in them. So once you have the omega-3, your body then can make DHA, EPA, these other fatty acids. And these are often in fish oils. So you probably see that in the fish oils. And omega-6 from that can be made this arachidonic acid. which you might see AHA. So omega-3 helps with normal heart functions. It lowers triglycerides. Omega-6 is can be inflammatory. So what's happening, we think, is that we're maybe getting more omega-6 and omega-3, which is causing a higher incidence of allergies, arthritis, diabetes, whereas omega-3 has been more helpful in controlling depression and Alzheimer's, preventing blood clots and so forth. So there is some advantage of possibly watching the balance of what type of fat we eat. The hemorrhage stroke here is when the weakening of the artery causes a break and then internal bleeding. Here are some food sources. So if you're wondering what food sources are omega-3, that they're not things we think of every day. When your grandparents were younger, they might have, maybe your great-grandparents were given cod liver oil every day, a tablespoon of cod liver oil. That was common because it's so high in vitamin A and omega-3. People now often will take these as a supplement. Flaxseed, salmon, olive, all these fish oils are good sources of omega-3. And the things we get a lot of, the reason we get so much is because a lot of these are subsidized. Corn, soybean are subsidized by the government, so there's a lot of these oils and they're used in a lot of products. Saturated fat then is mainly in meats, polyunsaturated fatty acid in plants, monounsaturated fatty acids in these particular oils, and then the omega-6 in particular, these oils, and the omega-3 in these types of oils. So now chia seeds, flax seeds, you'll see that a lot in foods because we know they're high omega-3. And cholesterol is mainly in meats and animal products. The recommended fat intake, there's no RDA for fat, but they just recommend a percent of our calories. So they're suggesting cutting back on saturated fat to 10% or less of your total calories. So we'll do some calculations later in this course. And then looking at making sure that trans fat, they really would like you to say no trans fat whatsoever, because it's been found to be deleterious for your heart. This here then is the recommendations again. Oops, sorry. The balance necessary. Okay, so here is again, as I mentioned, most Americans get 15 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3. So we get 15 times the amount of omega-6s than omega-3. Recommendations I've heard 1 to 1, 2 to 1. This is 4 to 1. So in order to get that balance down to a higher amount of omega-3s, one solution would be a Mediterranean diet, which is that diet which includes olive oil, yogurt, garlic, a lot of fresh vegetables and whole grains, and a lot less meat and less dairy. That's one possibility of a way to encourage a better balance of fat. So here it is, again, every day, of course, activity, a lot more legumes, beans, nuts, seeds. Only twice a week, trying to get fish. Every week, once a week, chicken, yogurt, and eggs. So not very often. This is the main food source. So that might be one way to encourage that. Moving on to fluids then, the second half of this week, we're just looking at the importance of just fluid in general that we need. Sometimes we drink fluids just to feel full, but also we need it for many, many purposes in our body. You can look through these. There's a joint, this lubricating of the joint. There's a lot of water around the brain for protecting it. There's saliva and mucus that helps us digest and move food through our system. And also it's part of our blood system, the high amount of water in the blood. Where is all the water? Well, about 2/3 of the water is in our intracellular, inside the cell, and 1/3 is outside in the tissues. So if you think of the cells, the cytoplasm, all the components inside the cell, a large amount of water is in each cell. So that's where most location is. And then where is it in our body? It's a lot, some in our bones, some in our fat, The more muscle you have, the more water you have, the more water you'll need to replenish. Males tend to have more muscle, so they tend to need more water than females. And as we get older, we have less water because we have less lean body tissue as we age. So here again just shows that how much water is in our brain, in our blood, the importance of maintaining that control. So this is discussion about the water. It's also present in food, so we don't need to drink water. Always a lot of our water comes from the food we eat. Even cheddar cheese, which you don't think of as containing water, has 35% of its component is water. So we want to make sure we have a balance, and that's why we have the thirst mechanism. Our hypothalamus will let us know when we are thirsty, but sometimes it's too late. We have to keep drinking even when we don't feel thirsty. So it might often lag. So when we feel thirsty, it's possibly we're already a little bit dehydrated. It's especially important for young children to monitor the fluids because they have a higher percentage of water than older people, and a little bit of loss could be quite detrimental. The same thing with seniors. They have a higher risk of dehydration just because they don't notice their thirst as much. They may not want to get up and use the bathroom as much. They might be on diuretics, so they lose more water. And then athletes have to be careful when they're in the middle of some competition, and if it's a humid or they're out in the heat, they need to weigh themselves before and after the event to make sure they rehydrate. If they lose, for every pound, they should drink 2 to 3 cups of fluid to replenish the loss. And then for dehydration, it's really important. If you lose more than 4% of your body weight, you can have headache and dizziness. And as you get to the 10% loss, you really can have the heat exhaustion, and which can lead to a coma and even to death. So these heat exhaustion, heat stroke are very serious concerns for athletes. And then the last point here is, can we consume too much water? Yes, you can. If you drink water too quickly, it's actually called water intoxication. It can be fatal because your kidney doesn't have time to process all the water quickly enough, and it leads to what's called hypo or low sodium. Because you've added so much water so quickly, it can lead to swelling of the brain. So there are dangers in getting too much water. So that ends the little series of slides for this chapter, lesson 4. Let me know if you have questions by contacting me through email. Thank you.